Let's start off with Chess Tomlinson, who's a brilliant writer from the Northeast, and specifically Great Gateshead. I met Chess before I joined Tiger, I worked in commissioning at BBC in comedy commissioning, and I met Chess through Laugh Lessons, which is a short form strand that they run, and now we're working on a project at Tiger together. We have a project in development that we've optioned of a brilliant script and idea of Chess's. So yeah, we're just wanting to talk a little bit about getting that first step in the door of the industry, that first step on the ladder, and how to do that from a producer perspective and commissioner perspective, which is sort of my experience, and from a writer perspective. So, Chess, thank you for being here. So to get started, can you tell us about what you see as the first thing that got you in the industry, or the first thing where you thought, like, this is the thing you've been striving for, and your first step in the door?
Like foot in the door is like, I don't know, there's so many false foots in the door a lot of the time. You're like, yeah, this is it, and then it's not, and you get the door slammed in your face, or it's just repeatedly, like, you've got your foot stubbornly there, and it's just repeatedly, like, smashing your foot, and that's painful, and you bring it out, and then you try again, and it's a revolving door, and all the Nepo babies are just going through, and then you're like, right, let me in, and then all the people from London are going through, and you're like, come on, we're up here, and things are happening, and I think there's been a lot of, like, false foots, like, a lot of, like, I feel like it's it, and I come from an acting background for, like, 10 years since graduating, and you think something's going to be it, and then it's not, and I think trying to, like, that first foot, I was thinking about, like, when it felt like that moment that I felt, right, okay, I feel safer now, and I trust that the foot is kind of in the door, was when we've been chatting for a while, but it was when I messaged Hannah and I was coming down to London. I drive vans for a side job if anyone needs a van driving down to London. Yes. And great. And I had a van going down, and I was like, I'm going to be in London. Can I come in, like, and meet up with you and have a coffee? And Hannah was like, come into the office and have a chat with David, who's head of Tiger Aspect, and who I've been chatting to for a while as well through the networking events up here. And I was like, do I need to prep anything for the meeting? And Hannah was like, no, David just wants to see if you're happy. And I was like, me, that was very exciting. It was like a career orgasm moment of like, okay, this is really exciting. Like, I feel like I'm just going to turn up and we can just chat. And all of a sudden, it was this massive relief where I didn't feel like I was going to be scratching at the walls trying to be like, prove something, but that these people trusted me as a creative and as a person, and that we could just, like, have a chat and a laugh, and I could trust that my foot was in the door. So I think that was, like...
That's nice to know from my perspective, because I wasn't aware that was, like, meaningful to you in that way.
Yeah.
To have that conversation. So that's really nice to know. Can you, maybe the sort of most crucial steps, can you talk about what you think were the biggest steps to get to that point? Like, what were the most significant points in your path to getting to there?
Yeah. I think we're in a really exciting time in the Northeast. There's eventually some funding and, like, authentic representation of people, like, people's voices and creative voices being, like, there at the beginning of a story. And I moved back from London in 2020, and it's just happens to be a really exciting time to be up here. So I think one of the first steps was I'm in a writer's room called Gossips, run by Emma Roxburgh, who has a company called Story Made, and there was a call out for indie production companies from the BBC to put forward, like, sketch ideas, and one of my ideas was picked by the BBC, and I was picked as one of the, like, writer performers of 2021. And we filmed a sketch called Becoming a Karen, about a woman learning to be the best Karen she can be, a mockumentary. And I think that was, like, a really good turning point. It was a look, but a lot of graft and a lot of time and a lot of honing my voice as a writer to get to that point. but it was one of the like significant steps, because then like David came up to me at a networking event. I'm rubbish at networking events, so we can chat about that, but he came up to me, and so that was like a great start to a relationship. It platformed on BBC, and then it was such a way in to email people and send them the link and say, this is something I've created, and it showcased my voice as a writer and actor quite well. And then just emails like badgering, like I was looking back at our relationship on emails, because Hannah was a BBC commissioner in the North, and I think I emailed. We met at I got into like an after drinks party without a band at one of these networking events at the BBC Comedy Awards 21, and Gus Khan was like hosting. I was going to say au pair, and that's not right. Hosting it, and there was like at the Tyne Opera House, and I got in without a band, and I met Hannah, and we chatted, and I sent a follow-up email, and I said, could we chat about, I think it was indie production companies in the North, because I wanted to write out to indies to say, look, I'm here and this is what I'm creating, and I want to build my slate. So that happened, and then we were just emailing back and forth, and over the space of like a year and a half, then Hannah moved to Tiger, and then you kind of got in touch. And was
I think you were near top of the list. I don't know who top of the list was.
Not the top. Harsh, Hannah. I've heard.
What a diss.
Well, yeah, because when you moved to Tiger, I emailed and I was like, have you got any agent like people you'd recommend as agents, and then you were like, have you got any ideas? I'd love to chat. And I was like, no, I haven't. Like, even if they were floating around, I was like, they're not developed enough. And so I was like, oh, maybe in a while. And Hannah was like, even if it's a log line, even if it's even if it's just something, let's just chat and see what comes of it. And so I panicked, put like 4 ideas together on a couple of pages. And then we had a chat, and then one of them's like we just talked about a lot, and it seemed to be a good place to start.
Yeah. And you initially, I mean, the project that we're working on, you initially were sort of pitching it to me as like a really short, 3 to 5 minute short, and now we're positioning it as a series outline. So yeah, it should say like where we are now. We've so Chess put together a treatment and some example scenes of this idea, and then Tiger have now optioned it, so that means they've sort of bought the rights to be able to start shopping it around. So Chess and I will now work together for however long it takes to sort of develop the idea and flesh it out, and then start thinking of where to take it and making it the best package we can to sell it into commissioners. That's nice that it's all a relationship journey on email.
I know, yeah, I was going October 2021. But yeah, no, it was, I think those steps, like, I don't know, I don't really have like solid steps to get into this option. Like, a lot of it is emails. You forget how many like rejections along the way, and emails, and just honing your craft as you learn and grow. And then I work hard, but I think a lot of the time it is right place, right time. And I think, like I said, I think it's a really exciting time to be in the Northeast, and I think we are like, I think this is a good place to be right now.
Here. It's really nice to come up and feel like, especially with the BBC, have sort of put financial commitment up here, and then it's been the city of comedy for the past year, so they've had their own initiatives and things. So it's felt like, I don't know, I obviously don't live here, but it feels like there's more of a buzz and things happening, especially when I'm looking for ideas from the North and sort of looking for, and I know that there's sort of a proper community up here that I can come to and start speaking to other, especially in comedy. Like, it's a really nice network up here, I think. Speaking of networking, that was the thing that always, I mean, still does, I find it daunting still, but like, I found it easier the further I've gone along. But have you got any tips for networking when you're sort of trying to find those connections at the beginning of and building relationships to sort of help you along the way?
Yeah, well, networking is awful. It's a necessary evil, I guess. It doesn't come naturally to me. I deal with a lot of anxieties, and when we were like BBC City of Comedy, Newcastle was, there was loads of networking events happening a lot, and I don't know, I think it was a bit of a roller coaster. So there was the BBC Comedy Festival, and then I was a recipient of Comedy 50/50 bursary to go to the Edinburgh TV Festival, which was really good to go and listen to the stories, demystify and listen to like what producers were looking for, that kind of thing, and commissioners. But those events, I felt, even if I learned things, it was a lot of, I thought, right, I'm going to just like be bold and go up to producers, but that doesn't come naturally to me. And at those events, mainly, you can argue this if you want, I feel like it's like London producers or producers from around the world maybe that haven't seen each other in a while, and it's kind of a piss up for them. So I think they're like catching up with each other because they haven't seen each other in a while. And so what I got the most out of those events was that I was networking with peers who are going to grow up in the industry with me, and one day will be running the show. And they were people that I've stayed in contact with, who I support, who I can get feedback on scripts, we can do script swaps, and people I want to collaborate with, people who share their contacts with us as well. So I think that I think is better to go and try and find your way, how you cope with those situations, and try and find your way of doing it softly. You don't have to go right up to someone if that doesn't come naturally to you. Maybe reach out to them afterwards and say, oh, I saw you do that, or you were on that panel and I really loved what you said about that. Or I messaged someone on Twitter, another writer, and I was like, do you want to take a break at some point during the day at the festival and meet and go for a pizza? And that was Anna Costello, who wrote Dead Canny. And so we went for a pizza and I got to know her a lot better, and then we came back to the festival. So I think just trying to find your way of keeping as safe as possible in those environments, because I just go into fight or flight and it's awful.
They feel so transactional because you feel like in any of those sort of schmoozy environments, I feel like there's all power dynamics and things going on, and people, everybody kind of wants something usually, so it is a weird environment. I think I found it the same, that I used to go to them thinking that, I think the impression I had out of uni was that you go to these networking events and there'll be somebody there who can change my career. And actually, like you've said, I started to shift that and be like, okay, I'm going to go to this one and speak to 3 people. And usually I would like the person who's been dragged along by a friend and doesn't have anything to do with the industry, but had just made a new friend who felt equally uncomfortable. But sometimes you would find, I mean, I kind of, once I stopped having that sort of transactional mindset and thinking that, like, feeling like I was going wanting something, just going and being open-minded and saying, I'm going to speak to 3 people, and it might be like you say, like, I meet, coming from a producer perspective, I might meet somebody who's a writer and we have something in common, and so we can stay in touch and potentially look at doing projects together later in the line. Or somebody who's just within the industry, we do the same sort of thing, but I've made a friend within the industry who can be a support network and sort of somebody that I can collaborate with in one way or another in the future. And then it's easier now for me because with my job, I'm looking to make connections because I have and people, that's more clear to people what I'm looking for. Like, I have a purpose in the room if I'm at a comedy networking thing or a TV networking thing. But I think, making it more manageable and not thinking that there's going to be this thing that's going to change your career in one step, but might be somebody who can, support you along the way, I think. And
having a drink.
Probably
helps a bit. I don't know, just correct.
Are there any other skills that you think have been useful in sort of, whether it's sort of persevering or times of self-doubt or motivation or
you mean through rejection?
I
buy a plant. Every time I get a rejection, I buy a plant, and now I live in a jungle. yeah, I think it's really hard, like, to build up that resilience constantly, and there's not a way. You just need to feel the rejection, or especially coming from an acting. Now I started writing, I was like, it's just another way to get rejected, and then my whole love life is another way to get rejected. But how do I deal with it? I feel like, say if it's a role that I was auditioning for, I'm trying to find the fastest path from being like upset and angry to wanting to champion the person who gets the role or the person that gets that opportunity. And it's hard, and it's I need to keep trying that craft. But I think if I can't get over these moments at the career that I'm at in this foot in the door stage, if I can't get over the fact that someone got a role in a short film over me, then I don't know how the hell I would deal with it when I'm like the second person to get in be in the next Doctor Who. I don't know. The higher you climb, the further you fall. So if I can find a way to have grace for that, and just keep the mantra of like, what's for you won't go by you. I think we can, like, there's opportunities for everyone. I think up here we've been so underfunded and underrepresented for so long. At the comedy festival, it became a bit cutthroat. Like, I felt like people were like scrambling for these opportunities and scared to be left out, and actually, like, there is enough to go around, and just keep writing your things. That's rejected, right, fine, I've got 5 other projects going, like, I've got other things bringing me joy, so that when something doesn't quite work out, it's all being for something, it's all relevant to wherever you're going to end up.
And how have you found people up here to collaborate with? You were saying you're part of a writer's room and things. Have you gone about finding the right people and
the right people to collaborate with? I think it takes a while to like trust, I guess. Even if someone comes highly recommended by someone you trust, then you need to still find your creative rhythm with people.
I'm just checking the
No,
time.
yeah,
I'm not just checking my phone in the middle of you speaking.
Yeah, I feel drawing a blank.
Or how have you found people to reach out to, like industry people, like through networking events, or like it's nice that you've gone through Twitter and had like that's a nice way to reach out to people.
Yeah. I think like messaging, you know, at the BBC Festival actually, I met a Scottish lass in the toilet, and I was like, hi, who are you? What are you? I'm a writer. All right, okay, you're a writer. And she was like, my name's Elaine. And I was like, oh my God, are you Elaine Gracie? And because she was Scottish and she was called Elaine, and I was like, it might be her. And I fangirled her, and I don't know, I just was like, I love your work. Like, I watched a short that she wrote a while ago, and like, called Endo, and really love it. And I think telling people, like approaching people that you enjoy their work, you like their creative voice, that's a good in. People like to know if you get something from their work and are entertained by it or whatever. Collaboration wise, I think I always look for like softness and kindness, and like people listening and wanting to champion my creative voice, and hence Hannah. Because like I've been kind of saying, that I don't think you have to like go with a certain like direct energy towards things. I think you can kind of approach in different ways. So it's finding like similar people who are gonna champion you, and on so many levels it's like, do we politically like align? Do we like are you a champion of like unrepresented voices as well? Like, and actually, are you going to go the length? Sometimes I kind of test producers. I haven't done this with you. But like, I'll send them a shit idea, a rubbish idea, and then they'll be like, no, but like, what else have you got? Whereas someone else would just be like, no, bye. And I think there's like I think trusting like David, like sending things through to David at Tiger Respect, he has been so generous with his time of just going like, because I'm learning as I go, writing wise, sent him through some like scripts that I'd be like, I can't look at anymore. And he's been like, it's not like maybe there yet, but like let's see, like give it a bit of time and let's see what comes of it, and then trusting that relationship kind of that relationship has gone the time. Now I think he's an amazing champion, and he really, like, as a company, they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're bringing projects up, and they're doing paid shadowing like roles on set, so we can all like learn together and keep going together, and that's all like things set up here, written by people up here, and it just takes time, I guess, to find the right people who are going to match your energy and like motivation.
And when you found those people, how do you, because you're saying you send people shit ideas
I'm so sure. Regret saying that.
How do you know when do you feel ready to send something off? Like how many when do you feel like this is at a point to send it out to producers or agents or whoever you're reaching out to?
It depends on who and at what point, I guess, it's developed, because if I know they trust me as a creative and know that I can do better, they'll give me some feedback and then I can send it again. Again, it just matters where you're at in your kind of conversations with the producers. How many ideas have they seen of yours? How many one-pager like treatments have they seen? I created I filmed a sizzle reel, which is like a trailer for an idea, and did a treatment and 3 example scenes, and sent that out to a load of people, actually from the list that you gave us, and that's how I know Nadia.
Oh yeah.
And that was good, but then that got me meetings, and then it got an option with Little Monk Pictures, who are based in Manchester, and then Hannah, with Hannah it was like, one line, and so it just kind of depends where you're at in the conversation with that development producer, I guess. Because producers, they want a say in it, right? Like they want a say in kind of sometimes developing it up to the treatment, up to the scenes, and especially the sizzle.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't want that much of a say in it. I just want enough of a say in it to get win over David, who's my boss, and make sure that we get to make the thing. What was the thing that just occurred to me that I haven't asked you? You've moved back to the northeast from London.
Yeah.
How have you found that in terms of your career, in terms of writing, but also, do you think going to London was useful for a period, and what's that transition been like?
So I lived in London for 6 years and then moved back in 2020. So not a great time to move back, and didn't really know anyone because I'd lived out of Newcastle the northeast for 10 years. And I don't know, I was trying to think about this, because for a while, if you'd asked me about 6 months ago, I would have been I was born again Geordie, and I was like, yes, I hate London. And now I feel actually it was, you do you. If it's going to be good for you, for me, I'm trying to make everything relevant so that it doesn't feel pointless in my life. And for me, I built up resilience. I did I worked 6 odd jobs, 7 odd jobs at a time, and loads of different things to try and just make ends meet. And I was never creative. And I lived with people who were jobbing actors, and that was really hard to be see you soon, you're going to film it, and I'm going to work in a coffee shop from 5:30 in the morning. And it was really, really hard, and I didn't feel creative at all. And I think I mourn a little bit of that time, but also I've built up a lot of resilience, a lot of stories, and moving back, again, it's just a good time. It's been a really good time to move back. Lucky, it's just lucky that we have funding coming in, and that I've been on the northeast for a little while now.
I think lockdown has also helped with that, because it's made people less, like, Zooms have become a normal part of, like, my week now, and it means, and sort of it's leveled, it's not quite the same, but it has leveled the playing field to an extent, in that lazy commissioners and producers who won't travel can now get FaceTime with people up here, which it definitely helps.
It made those connections. I think the BBC being up here for a year, like the BBC City Comedy, it felt like we were like the centre of the UK all of a sudden, with like all these commissioners and agents and producers in Northern Stage, and it was like, that's not ever happened before, and it was really exciting. So I think you don't necessarily need to anymore. My heart's split. A lot of my friends lived there, and now I've made a few friends up here again. I was going to networking events in 2021 when lockdown finished. I wasn't networking for job opportunities. I was literally like, I need friends. Can we go for a coffee and be friends, please? I don't think so necessarily anymore, but it does make you feel a bit more connected, because it's a long old haul to make London, decentralise London, and make us feel like we can have a career up here that's sustained in the creative industry, where you finish on set and you can go home to your family. Like, you know, so many people are just commuting and or away for 6 months at a time, and I just have hope that it's coming.
When I was at BBC, and they have, like, every now and then they have waves of where they're relocating people outside of London, so usually the north, and they'd have like crisis meetings and Zooms to talk people, like, tell people it's going to be okay if you have to move to the north. But I loved it whenever people from London or based in London were getting really like, this is ridiculous, we're being expected to leave London to go and work somewhere else. And like, this is what it's like for everybody else who comes to London. I absolutely loved it whenever anyone was having a hissy fit about having to leave. I miss those days. So now you've got 3 things optioned with 3 different companies, is that right?
Well, that's what I put on my bio, but so foot in the door with Tiger, like, that has been like a massive validation, confidence boost for my writing.
Nice.
I've got an option with Little Monk Pictures, which I think, that's really, really hard. We've been looking for development money since last August, just to develop the characters, develop the script. But we're kind of going to look in the avenue of like web series, that kind of thing, which is good, and I'm excited by it because I'm still honing my craft. So to try and write an episode that's 5 minutes long and keep a hook and keep an audience and build, like, that's a whole different world to me. So I need to do some research and whatever. And then I won a writing competition the end of last year, which was platformed on BBC Writers' Room, and the winning script was tipped for an option.
Nice.
Yeah.
So now you've got 3 foot in the door. Is there anything that surprised you on your journey to where you are now about the industry specifically, or about writing?
Yeah, just, it still surprises us, and it always will. But there's like incredibly creative, inspirational, so talented writers and actors and people in our industry that get overlooked, and it will always surprise me, and they get underfunded, and there's stories that should be told, and that will always surprise me.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm the same. The kind of, sort of same ballpark. I don't know, that sounds very bleak, but the nepotism and things, it still surprises me that how, like, I actually think the further I've gone up, the closer you get to like the higher levels in companies and things, you see it. I think it's more blatant because they feel more untouchable. So things get happy. It kind of I didn't know. Yeah,
easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got there's a special part of my anger that's allowed, just reserved specially for like nepotism. I think it's just like how we've been so overlooked for so long as well, because you can do outreach as much as possible, but when it's someone's daughter who's going to be able to write the next whatever, it's like you just have to let that hunger go eventually and just keep your own craft. But it is continuously frustrating.
Yeah. I think I've struggled with that moving from commissioning into development, because I've worked in commissioning for a few years, and my commissioning experience is at the BBC, and I think there's the same issues across the board in commissioning. So this isn't just about the BBC, but I think I struggled with the thought of going into development and knowing that I'm commissioning into teams where if you're not mates with them or related to them, then you just have to go and find good ideas. So I've had to really just fight for the good ideas. Yeah. But it's disheartening on one side of things, because you do see things coming through where you know that there's a connection somewhere. But then also, if a good idea is a good idea, then commissioners will go with it regardless. So that's what I'm gunning for as a development producer.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then now, where you are with 3 things sort of on the table and more ideas, I'm sure, what's your next step? And what have you got that in mind, or do you think like where you want to be in 5 years and you're sort of finding the steps between that? Or
my
obviously
foot in the door,
series commission with the project we're working on.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, series commission, the second series commission.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
International. Great. I'm trying to work out the best way to not be flavour of the month up here in the northeast, but how do we keep the doors open for everyone? We've talked about a mentoring scheme, but I've started, what if someone comes out of the blue and you can kind of like look at what they've done, and they send you a pilot, like would you, unsolicited script? I wanted to kind of ask about that, because
yeah, so I can if I've never come across a writer before, I need to see their writing, so I do need a script of some sort. The script doesn't necessarily have to be for the project that they're pitching, so it could be a spec script that you think just best sells your writing, especially from my point of view, comedy writing. And then, although that's not always even the case, I've got a project in development at the minute that is from a drama writer, and their spec script was drama, and we're working on a comedy together. But yeah, sort of the less I know about you, the more I need to see, basically, and the more that my boss will need to see for me to get it away within the development team. We're a really small team. There's like 4 of us, 2 development producers. David is head, and then we've got a exec producer. But it's really just 2 producers who are sort of the first people who are reading scripts and reading ideas. And I was counting this up actually because I thought it might be useful to know. Last week I got 46 or so new scripts that week, and the week before I got 36. So
my jaw just hit the floor. God, that's like terrifying. But
some weeks I'll get like 10 maybe on a quiet week, but like yeah, it's a big turnover of scripts, and that, to be fair, though, some of those might be treatments and maybe not scripts, but it means that when I'm going through my emails, the people who've put been really clear in an email of what they want. So actually it's like they want to know if they've got 5 ideas and want to know which one I think has the most legs, then I can get back to that email more quickly, and they've made it really clear what they want, and that's that email dealt with. Or if they've sent me treatments and I can just look through the treatments and then ask for the one that I want to read a script of, then those are the ones. It's just like, in terms of me managing that sort of workload, I always know that the one where I've got a script without a treatment or without a blurb from somebody I don't know, that will get further down my list of emails, because I know it's going to take the most time for me to sort of invest in. So yeah, I
kind of wanted to ask about rejections as well. Like, how do you manage that? Like, how do you say if it is that full pilot and you don't know the writer, that might take a long time to get to, but is there a point where how do you manage that, like, to let them know?
So it really varies. Sometimes I turn things down. There's so many reasons that I turn stuff down before, and with commissioners turn stuff down before it even gets to the quality of the project. So sometimes it's like, I might think it's a really good project, but it's in an area or a sort of there's some sort of theme within it or topic within it that just doesn't resonate for me, and I don't think I'm going to be able to best support that writer because I don't know that world, or I don't there was something that I got pitched that was very laddie and very football-y, and I thought, I don't know anything about football, I'm not going to be able to help you unless it's about Manchester United and have a weird loyalty to it, but otherwise I'm not going to be able to help. So I can turn things down just because it doesn't feel like the right project for me to be working on with that writer. I find it really hard to turn stuff down because I always sort of question my own authority in turning stuff down, but then I sort of have to see it as what do I think that I can best support, or the writer that I can work with for up to at least 3 years. So that's one consideration. But one thing that's helpful that David has instilled in me is that if I give feedback on a script, and if I'm turning it down, I try and give, depending on my workload, is how detailed these feedback notes will be. But if I can give feedback that usually on a first read will be quite broad or top note, that person who submitted it has had somebody within the industry read it and give them hopefully useful notes. They can choose to disregard them if they want to, but like from a sort of professional opinion, there'll be a reason why I'm turning it down, and I'll be as honest as I can about that and sort of as clear as that about that in my feedback. So even if I'm turning something down, they've had my time. I've spent time reading their work and given them sort of, like I say, an industry perspective on how I read it, and whether it could be that it is a really, like, I know BBC have got something along this lines in development, and that's a really useful thing to know if you're pitching something that's like the same ballpark. That's quite often one of the, again, when I'm whittling through my emails, if I see that there's something about a sketch idea that's not going to get commissioned, and that's a very easy thing for me to
just say nope. But it's so helpful to get the feedback as a writer, I think, especially when you're sending to a lot of producers. That feedback is really essential to go, right, I hadn't thought about that character, I'll hone it, and then I can send it out to other producers. So it helps.
And I'm usually clear as well if I think there's something that isn't quite right yet, but there's something about it I like. So it might be a no. I might not even be a no. I'll just sort of give my notes, and that might be more detailed. If I think there's some potential in it one way or another, then I might just give notes on. If for us to consider it, it would need to be. I get ideas pitched that are sitcom ideas that are over half an hour, and they won't get commissioned. So. And I know that the first note that anyone will ask for is to bring the script down to half an hour. So I quite often will give that as a round of notes so that I don't take it to David or my boss. Yeah.
And what about when you do take an idea? Let's talk about yeses.
Yes.
When you do take an idea, do you what is the first step? So you think it's got legs. When you said you were kind of having conversations with David as we were like still putting together the treatment.
Yeah.
When do you what's the process there?
So when people are just talking to me, it's a sort of safe space, and we can go back and forth as much as we like before I take it to anybody who has control of the purse strings. So if I've got somebody's project that I'm really excited about, I think it might need a little bit of tweaking. We might go back and forth just with a few notes before I try and pitch it internally. Whilst that sort of negotiation's going on between me and the writer, I'll usually sort of just verbally float the idea with my boss to see to find out what his questions of the script are. Like, quite often he'll ask where I see it being pitched to, or he'll sort of ask questions from a more sort of commercial mindset, I guess, than I am, because I just get excited about stories. And then once I think we've sort of gone back and forth and got it ready, and like with your project, I asked him what he would want to see to be able to pitch that, so it saved us having to work on having to write a pilot, because he was confident enough in your writing to just see example scenes, and so it would be, I'd sort of be negotiating that with my boss as well and trying to make sure that I've got this package with the writer ready to pitch into David. I'm really keen for people to do as little as possible before we can put any money behind it. So when you're newer to me or David, then you have to just to prove that you can write, you have to do a bit more work unpaid before we can get his sign off on things. But like, yeah, the further you get along the road, hopefully it's a quicker decision from David and we can release money and get development money into things.
So it's like music to my ears to hear like like development producers saying, we want you to do the least amount possible before we give you money. It's like good, because we do so much for free all the time, right? Like creating and before even like bringing it to you, like I think I was filming sizzle reels and doing this and that, and now so that's really good to hear.
I mean, that's my ethos, but not necessarily the company's ethos. So
I want a full written series. Thank you. And how do you find like the storytellers that you trust to deliver the story and that you can work with for 3 years or more?
I think a bit of it is in that the back and forth before I take it internally, because that again, like I say, it's sort of finding people that I think that I can work with and have a good relationship, not just on that idea but over a long period of time. So yeah, it is because it is, you know, ideally we're going to be working on a project together for a long time, so it does have to be people that I know that I'm going to be able to work with over those periods, as well as having an idea that I can invest in. So it is a bit of that. The early days of that relationship should be us both sussing each other out as well from a writer's point of view. Like, you should be finding producers who really get your idea, aren't trying to bend it out of shape unnecessarily, and aren't trying to, in my opinion, shouldn't be trying to put too much of their own stamp on things. They should be trying to nurture and pull out the best version of your story, rather than wanting their own credit on it, I think.
I think that was like trusting that my foot was in the door was a bit that. It was a bit of you trusting me as a creative, and then also like protecting my creative voice from when like each stage that we've been going through, we're looking for like established writer to help write it, and so then there was like a lot of vetting that went on to know that that person wasn't going to take over the project. And I think there's a lot of like care that I see that you give to like the projects, and I think
I think that's a nice one, thank you. But I think I think it's a question, like when you do interviews and stuff, I always get asked like, what do you think is a good commissioner, or what do you think is a good producer? And I really, from experience, having worked with a bunch of commissioners in audio and television and producers in both, the ones that I found the most difficult and have the most challenging relationships with writers have been the ones who want to put more of their own mark on it than they should be doing as somebody who's part of the production or commissioning team, I think. So I've kind of learned from that. Not that I particularly wanted to be throwing my weight around anyway. But
what's just a little bit about your like journey to where you are now.
Mm-hmm.
Like at what point did you know you wanted to be a development producer?
My journey is, I really feel like it's a mess. I think it's I knew I wanted to be a development producer a long time. Like once I got into commissioning, I started out in Manchester, and I had quite a meandering career, always within media, but quite like I worked in production originally in ITV. This was like 10 years ago, and BBC had just moved, like I think they moved in 2012, and I hit a wall at ITV in terms of just trying to move up, because people just don't leave their jobs up there, and there's a limited pool of things that were being made at the time. So I got my eyes set on BBC and trying to get in there. I took a role that just meant that I could get into the BBC, and that was a rights assistant in children's. I loved working in children's, but rights and contracts is just not me at all, and I hated the job. It was like, I did it for 12 months and it was miserable. And then I hopped around the BBC for a while, in different roles within marketing and creative and radio and digital. Worked for iPlayer for a bit, Radio 1 for a while. And between Manchester and London. And when I first started out in TV, the thing that worried me about it was that I never knew if I wanted to move to London. I kind of was a homebody and wanted to stay in Manchester. But then I sort of realised that, again at the time, and I hope it's different now, that if I didn't move to London, there was a limit to what genres I could work in, what areas I could work in, and the sort of climbing would be that bit harder. and I couldn't afford to move to London on an entry-level job either. So much of my career was kind of dictated or shaped by the fact that I wanted to stay in Manchester. I didn't have a lot of money to be able to fall back on and things. So there's like, it felt really like I was sort of in the right ballpark, but never quite finding the right place. And then once I started to move down to London, finally accepted that I lived in London after 4 years of going back and forth, and then I tell people that I live between the two, and then was like, I just live here now, and eventually changed all of my posts from my mum's house to London. Then I started to work. I'd worked in comedy outside of my day job in Manchester. Worked at for producers and festivals and things, and then started doing the same in London. And then I left BBC for a while, went to Channel 4, worked in digital. I went to Penguin, the publishers, and managed their audio and production suite, and did all kind of production stuff and a bit of everything, because it was just a small studio, but I got to do a bit of everything there. And then, because I was working in comedy so much, I was like, oh, actually, now that I've accepted I live in London and no comedy existed in TV in Manchester when I was there, I was like, I can actually just try and get into comedy now in my day job and stop having 2 jobs. Although I still have 2 jobs. Anyway, and then I got back into the BBC and commissioning in audio, in podcasting. And it was once I got there, I was working in commissioning, but within audio, because the development stage is so quick, because I could see an act on a Friday night in a comedy club and think, they're really funny, they'd be really funny in conversation with this person. I could go and record them, proof of concept, just prove the chemistry because it was unscripted, take it to my boss and say, these 2 people are really funny, they've got this idea. And so I was kind of doing a development role within a commissioning team. And that was, as I got more into commissioning and moved from audio commissioning into TV commissioning, I realised I actually feel one step removed from the role that I like, which is sort of spotting new talent, being able to work with them directly, being able to, like I was saying, sort of work with them in supporting them in telling their own stories, rather than sort of being the commissioning, slightly more commercial minded lens. I think the thing that gets me hooked is the story, and once you become a commissioner you have to be a bit more practical, and I like just getting carried away with the stories, and being in development is the place to do that more.
And now you're at Tiger, and that's how what's the kind of like day to day, once you've got through your bazillion emails of scripts, what's the kind of...
So it's reading scripts, it's meeting people, going for coffees, having Zooms. David, because David took me on knowing that my passion is the north and stories outside of London, so he's been really good at letting me I usually do a week in the north somewhere, a month, and come and meet people face to face. And then projects that we've got in development is sort of either doing research for them, setting up meeting, like we've been sort of putting a team together for your project, or things that we've got in production, putting together writers' rooms, so finding names and people to put in the room for those sorts of things, reading scripts of things we've got in production, giving notes on projects that we've got in that are optioned with other writers, lots of reading and talking, and going to see shows as well, like a lot of going to see live comedy and live shows here, in the north and in London. I think that's everything that I do.
When does the, and if ever, because this is my not knowing, but when does do you leave the project at any point, like once it's fully developed? Like it's
kind of up to me, so I can be a pure development producer. This varies from company to company, but I could be a pure development producer and just hand it over once something's away, or I can stay on it as an associate producer, who's sort of like a assistant producer, I guess, and you sort of shadow the producer and do everything that they need you to do.